The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast space. Ambassador Jinwoo Kim stepped inside and immediately felt small. The chamber was enormous. It stretched up so high that the ceiling disappeared into shadows. Rows of seats curved around in perfect circles, rising level after level like an ancient amphitheater. Jinwoo walked slowly across the polished floor. His footsteps seemed tiny in the huge room. Above him, thousands of alien beings filled the seats. Some had scales that gleamed like metal, others had tentacles that moved like water. Many had eyes that glowed different colors in the dim light. All of them were watching him. The human ambassador wore his best formal uniform. It was dark blue with silver buttons that caught the light. On his chest was a small pin showing Earth, a tiny blue dot against the black of space. Compared to the elaborate armor and robes worn by the alien delegates, Jinwoo looked very simple, very human. Behind him walked 3 other humans. Captain Somin Lee moved with the precise steps of a soldier. Her uniform was crisp and clean, but everyone could see she was nervous. Her hand kept moving toward where her weapon would normally be, but no weapons were allowed in the council chambers. Hyunwoo Park carried a data pad that contained all of Earth's military information. The numbers were not good. Earth had 12 spaceships that could fight. The aliens had thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Hyunwoo tried not to think about those numbers as he followed Jinwoo toward the center of the chamber. Minho Choi brought up the rear. The scientist looked around with wide eyes, amazed by the technology he saw. Floating platforms carried alien delegates through the air. Holographic displays showed information in languages humans had never seen. Energy fields created barriers between different sections of the chamber. It was incredible and terrifying at the same time. At the center of the chamber stood a platform that rose from the floor like a mountain peak. This was where speakers addressed the council. Jinwoo climbed the steps slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he reached the top, the chamber fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes focused on the lone human figure. Jinwoo cleared his throat and began to speak. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," he said. His voice was amplified by hidden speakers so everyone could hear. "I come here today representing the human species of planet Earth. We seek peaceful relations with all civilized worlds." A sound like thunder rolled through the chamber. It was alien laughter, not the kind humans made when something was funny. This was the sound predators made when they saw easy prey. From a section of seats covered in red light, a massive figure stood up. War Commander Thaxmore of the Velkari Empire was 3 meters tall. His body was covered in thick armor that looked like it was made from black metal. Spikes jutted from his shoulders and elbows. His face was hidden behind a helmet, but his eyes glowed red through narrow slits. "Peaceful relations," Thaxmore said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "How amusing. Tell me, little human, what makes you think your species deserves peace?" Jinwoo stood straighter. "We believe all intelligent life has value. We hope to share knowledge and culture with our galactic neighbors." More laughter filled the chamber. This time other species joined in. The Zenthari delegates hissed through their snake-like mouths. The Morvek pounded their fists on their seats, making sounds like drums. The Killian remained quiet, but their crystalline bodies flickered with colors that meant amusement. Thaxmore raised one armored hand, and the laughter stopped immediately. "Your species has been observed for 50 Earth years," he said. "You are weak. You fight among yourselves. You damage your own planet. You have no real technology. You control no territory beyond your single world." The war commander began to walk down from his section. His heavy footsteps rang out in the silence. Other Velkari warriors followed him. They moved like a pack of predators circling their prey. "The Velkari Empire has decided. Thaxmore continued as he approached the central platform. Your species will surrender 3 of your outer colonies. Your military will be disbanded. Your government will report to Velkari administrators. Captain Somin Lee stepped forward. We don't have any colonies, she said. We have research stations on Mars and Europa, but no colonies. Thaxmore stopped walking. He turned his helmeted head toward Somin. Then you will build colonies. You will populate them, and then you will give them to us. Hyunwoo Park felt his hands shake as he held his data pad. The demands were impossible. Earth barely had the resources to support its research stations. Building colonies would take decades they didn't have if the Velkari decided to attack. If we refuse? Jinwoo asked quietly. Thaxmore gestured toward the chamber walls. Suddenly, holographic displays appeared everywhere. They showed space battles, Velkari ships destroying entire fleets, planets burning, cities turning to glass under alien weapons. This is what happens to species that refuse Velkari generosity, the war commander said. Your tiny fleet would last perhaps 10 minutes against our advanced scouts alone. The displays changed to show Earth as seen from space, beautiful and blue and fragile. Then they showed Velkari battle fleets, hundreds of massive ships that looked like metal monsters, ships that could crack planets in half. Minho Choi stared at the displays and felt his heart sink. The scientist in him could appreciate the incredible technology, but the human in him was terrified. Earth had no defense against weapons like these. You have 1 Earth week to consider our offer, Thaxmore said. He climbed back onto the platform where Jinwoo stood. The alien towered over the human ambassador. When you return, you will kneel before this council. You will formally surrender your species to Velkari rule. You will beg for the privilege of serving us. The war commander leaned down so his helmet was close to Jinwoo's face. And if you refuse, we will turn your pretty blue world into a cloud of radioactive dust. Your choice, little human. Thaxmore straightened up and walked away. His warriors followed him. The other alien delegates began to disperse, chattering and hissing among themselves. Some seemed excited by the prospect of seeing Earth destroyed. Others appeared indifferent, as if they had watched this scene many times before. Jinwoo stood alone on the platform for a long moment. Around him, the vast chamber slowly emptied. The weight of his species' future pressed down on his shoulders like a mountain. Captain Somin Lee climbed up to join him. Sir, she said quietly, what do we do? Jinwoo looked at the empty seats where thousands of aliens had just been watching. None of them had spoken up for humanity. None had offered help or alliance. Earth was alone in a galaxy full of predators. We go home, he said finally. We tell them what happened here, and then we prepare for whatever comes next. The 4 humans walked out of the council chamber together. Behind them, the lights dimmed and the great doors closed with a sound like thunder. Somewhere in the darkness above, alien eyes still watched them leave. Earth had 1 week to decide its fate. 3 days had passed since the terrible meeting at the Galactic Council. On Earth, people watched the news with growing fear. The government had not told everyone about the Velkari ultimatum, but rumors spread quickly. Strange ships had been seen at the edge of the solar system. Military bases were on high alert. Something bad was coming. In the mountains of South Korea, Dr. Junho Yoon did not know about any of this. The old archaeologist was too busy with his work to watch the news. For 20 years, he had been digging in the ancient temple ruins near Mount Jiri. Most people thought he was wasting his time. The site was thousands of years old, but it seemed to contain nothing special. Just old stones and broken pottery. But Junho knew there was something more. Deep underground, his team had found chambers that were too perfectly built. The walls were too smooth. The angles were too exact. Ancient humans with simple tools could not have built something so precise. The morning sun was just beginning to shine on the mountainside when Junho climbed down into the deepest chamber. His assistant, Taehyung Seo, was already there, setting up lights and cameras. Taehyung was young and enthusiastic, fresh from university with new ideas about old mysteries. "Professor Yoon," Taehyung called out as the older man reached the bottom of the ladder. "You need to see this. Something changed overnight." Junho walked across the stone floor toward where Taehyung stood. The chamber was circular, about 10 meters wide. The walls were covered in strange symbols that no one had ever been able to read. But that was not what made Junho stop and stare. In the center of the room stood something that had not been there the day before. It was a pillar of crystal, rising from the floor like a frozen flame. The crystal was perfectly clear, but it seemed to have light moving inside it. Colors swirled and danced within the transparent stone. Blue and white and silver, flowing like water made of starlight. "This was not here yesterday," Junho whispered. He had explored every inch of this chamber. He would have remembered something so beautiful and strange. Taehyung nodded, his eyes wide with excitement. "I came down early to set up the equipment. When I turned on the lights, this was just here, growing out of the floor like it had always been there." The two men walked slowly around the crystal pillar. It was taller than a person and shaped like a twisted spear pointing toward the ceiling. The light inside it pulsed gently, like a heartbeat, made of energy. Junho pulled out his instruments and began to take measurements. The crystal was warm to the touch, even though the chamber was cold. It hummed with a sound too low to hear, but they could feel it in their bones. Most strange of all, his electronic equipment began acting oddly when he brought it close to the crystal. "The electromagnetic readings are off the scale," Taehyung said, looking at his tablet. "Whatever this thing is made of, it is not like anything in our databases." As Junho studied the crystal more closely, he noticed something carved into its base. Symbols that matched the ones on the walls. But these were clearer, easier to read. He had spent years learning to understand the ancient writing, and these symbols made his heart race. "What do they say?" Taehyung asked, watching his professor trace the carved marks with one finger. "They say, 'When the sky burns, the children of Earth will remember what they forgot.'" Junho translated slowly. "And this symbol here means inner fire or life energy." Taehyung frowned. "Life energy? Like in the old martial arts movies?" Junho nodded thoughtfully. Ancient Korean and Chinese texts often talked about ki or chi, the energy that flowed through all living things. Masters of martial arts claimed they could focus this energy to perform amazing feats. Most modern people thought it was just superstition. But what if it was not? "We need to call someone," Junho said. "Someone who understands both science and the old ways." 2 hours later, Nayeon Kim arrived at the dig site. She was a strange choice for a scientific consultation. Nayeon was a former champion of traditional martial arts who had somehow become a xenobiologist. She studied alien life forms while maintaining her training in ancient fighting techniques. Most scientists thought she was eccentric. Some thought she was crazy. But she was also brilliant, and she understood things that other people missed. Nayeon descended into the chamber and immediately froze when she saw the crystal pillar. Her training had taught her to be aware of energy flows, and she could feel something powerful radiating from the strange formation. "Where did this come from?" she asked, walking slowly around the crystal. Junho explained how they had found it, how it seemed to have appeared overnight. Nayeon listened carefully, then approached the pillar with the careful steps of a martial artist. She could sense something about this crystal that the instruments could not measure. "Professor," she said, quietly, "I think this thing responds to human bioelectric fields." "What do you mean?" Taehyung asked. Nayeon placed her hands a few centimeters away from the crystal surface. She did not touch it, but she focused her breathing the way her martial arts teachers had shown her. She imagined her ki flowing outward from her hands. The crystal began to glow brighter. The lights inside the transparent stone started moving faster, swirling in patterns that matched the rhythm of Nayeon's breathing. The humming sound grew stronger, and the electronic equipment began beeping and flashing warnings. Incredible, Junho breathed. It is responding to you. Nayeon moved her hands in slow, flowing motions around the crystal. The light followed her, movements, creating beautiful patterns within the stone. When she stepped back, the crystal gradually returned to its original gentle glow. This is not just a mineral formation, she said. This is technology, but it is designed to work with something that most alien species probably do not have. What is that? Taehyung asked. Human consciousness, human life energy, the key that our ancestors talked about in the old stories. Junho felt a chill run down his spine. The inscription said, "When the sky burns, the children of Earth will remember what they forgot." What if this crystal was left here for us to find? Before anyone could answer, Taehyung's phone began ringing. He answered it, then went pale as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Professor," he said, his voice shaking, "we need to get back to Seoul immediately. There are alien ships approaching Earth. The government is calling for all scientists and military experts to report for emergency duty." Nayeon looked at the glowing crystal pillar, then at the two archaeologists. "The sky is burning," she said, quietly. "And maybe we just found what we were supposed to remember." The three of them gathered their equipment quickly. As they prepared to leave the ancient chamber, the crystal pulsed one more time with brilliant light, as if it knew that its time had finally come. Above them, in the dark space between the planets, alien war ships began their approach to Earth. But deep in the mountains of Korea, humanity had just discovered that they were not as defenseless as they seemed. The ancient secret was awakening, and the galaxy was about to learn something new about the quiet species from the third planet. The emergency meeting room in Seoul buzzed with nervous energy. Military officers sat next to scientists. Politicians argued with engineers. Everyone had heard the terrible news by now. The Valkyrie fleet was coming, and Earth had less than 4 days to surrender or face destruction. Captain Soman Lee stood at the front of the room, pointing at a large display screen. Red dots showed the positions of enemy ships at the edge of the solar system. There were so many dots that they looked like a swarm of angry insects. "Latest intelligence shows 412 Valkyrie dreadnoughts," she reported to the assembled group. "Each one is capable of destroying our entire Pacific fleet. They also have support ships, fighters, and weapons we do not understand." General Woo Jin Kang, the head of Earth Defense, rubbed his tired eyes. He had not slept in 3 days. "What about our ships?" 12 destroyers, 8 cruisers, and the flagship Aurora, Somin answered. "Against their numbers, we would last maybe 15 minutes in open combat." Silence filled the room. Everyone knew the math. Everyone understood how hopeless their situation was. Then Dr. Junho Yoon cleared his throat from the back of the room. "There might be another way." All eyes turned to the old archaeologist. He looked out of place among the military uniforms and government suits. His clothes were still dusty from the dig site, and he carried an ancient-looking bag that seemed older than some of the people in the room. "Dr. Yoon," General Kang said carefully, "with respect, this is a military briefing. We need weapons and ships, not ancient history." Junho walked to the front of the room. Behind him came Nayeon Kim and young Taehyung Seo, carrying equipment cases. "What if I told you that ancient history might be our most powerful weapon?" He gestured to Taehyung, who began setting up a projection device. Soon, a holographic image of the crystal pillar appeared in the center of the room. The beautiful, swirling lights inside the crystal caught everyone's attention. "This was discovered 3 days ago in a temple site that is over 3,000 years old," Junho explained. It responds to human bioelectric fields in ways we are just beginning to understand. Nayon stepped forward. The crystal amplifies, something that appears to be unique to humans. Our ancestors called it Chi, or life energy. Most alien species in the galaxy probably do not possess this particular bioelectric signature. Admiral Sion Park, who commanded Earth's small space fleet, leaned forward in her chair. Are you saying this rock can help us fight alien warships? Not the crystal itself, Nayon replied, but what it represents, what it can teach us about abilities we never knew we had. She moved to stand next to the hologram. Yesterday, I was able to interact with this crystal using only focused mental energy and breathing techniques. The response was immediate and powerful. It overloaded electronic equipment within a 50-meter radius. Dr. Minho Choi, who had been at the Galactic Council meeting, suddenly sat up straighter. Overloaded electronics? Like an electromagnetic pulse? Similar, but different, Tae-hyung said, consulting his notes. The energy signature does not match any known electromagnetic phenomenon. It is something else entirely. General Kang stood up. Even if this is real, we have 4 days. You cannot train an army to use ancient martial arts techniques in 4 days. We do not need an army, Junho said quietly. We need one person, someone who already has the training, the discipline, and the courage to face impossible odds. Captain. Dong-Yun Lim had been sitting quietly in the corner of the room. At 28, he was the youngest starship captain in the Earth Defense Force. He was also a master of traditional Korean martial arts, having trained since childhood in the PRU. Old ways! Captain Lim, Soman called out. You have been studying martial arts your whole life. What do you think about this? Dong-Yun stood up slowly. He was not tall or imposing like the alien warriors they had seen at the Galactic Council, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of inner strength and unshakable calm. My grandfather used to tell stories about masters who could move without touching, who could break stones with their breath, who could turn the energy of attackers back against them, he said. I always thought they were just stories. He walked over to the holographic crystal and studied it carefully. But if this technology can amplify what we carry inside us, then maybe those stories were not just stories. Nayon nodded approvingly. The old masters understood something about human potential that we forgot as we became more focused on external technology. This crystal might help us remember. What exactly are you proposing? Admiral Park asked. Junho looked around the room at all the worried faces. We propose that Captain Lim takes a small diplomatic ship equipped with crystal technology to meet the Velkari fleet, under the pretense of delivering Earth's surrender. That is suicide, General Kong said bluntly. Maybe, Dong-Yun replied, but if we surrender, we die anyway. Our entire species becomes slaves. If we fight with conventional weapons, we die in 15 minutes. At least this way, we die trying something new. Over the next 2 days, teams of scientists and engineers worked around the clock. They studied the crystal formation and learned how to create smaller versions that could be integrated into equipment. The process was not easy, and they did not understand most of what they were doing. But the crystals responded to human presence, and that was enough to start with. Meanwhile, Nayon worked with Dong-Yun to prepare him for what might come. They practiced ancient breathing techniques and meditation methods. They explored ways to focus mental energy and direct it outward. Dong-Yun was already skilled in martial arts, but this was something deeper, something that connected the mind, body, and spirit in ways that modern training had forgotten. Sun Woo-jong and Yuna Oh, 2 researchers who specialized in traditional Korean culture, brought ancient texts that described legendary techniques. Most of the descriptions seemed impossible, but in light of the crystal discovery, they began to seem more like instruction manuals than fairy tales. The texts speak of masters who could shatter mountains with their bare hands, Yuna reported. They describe techniques for drawing power from the earth itself, for turning the force of enemies back against them. Legends, General Kang muttered, but he was listening carefully. Maybe, Sunwoo agreed, or maybe descriptions of abilities that we lost when we stopped believing they were possible. On the third day, Captain Dong-Yun Lim stood in the modified A diplomatic vessel that would carry him to meet the Velkari fleet. Crystal formations had been integrated into the ship's systems and into his flight suit. The technology hummed with energy that seemed to respond to his heartbeat. Ambassador Jinwoo Kim came to see him off. The older man looked tired and worried, carrying the weight of humanity's fate on his shoulders. "Captain," he said, "you do not have to do this. We can still try conventional diplomacy." Dong-Yun smiled calmly. "Sir, they have already told us what their diplomacy looks like. Slavery or death. I would rather try something different." As his ship prepared to launch, Dong-Hyun closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. He felt the crystal technology responding to his presence, felt something ancient and powerful stirring within his chest. In space, the Velkari fleet waited like a pack of metal predators, confident in their overwhelming strength. They had conquered dozens of species using the same tactics. Overwhelming force followed by humiliating surrender. They had no idea that they were about to encounter something completely outside their experience, something uniquely human. Captain Dong-Yun Lim's small diplomatic vessel moved through the darkness of space like a minnow swimming toward a school of sharks. Around him, the Velkari fleet spread out in every direction, their massive warships blocking out the stars. Each enemy dreadnought was the size of a city. Their hulls were covered in armor that looked like black scales, and weapons that could crack planets jutted from their sides like deadly spines. The ships moved in perfect formation, disciplined and terrifying in their synchronized menace. Dong-Yun's ship was tiny by comparison. It was designed for peaceful meetings, not for war. Its only weapons were small defensive systems that would not scratch the paint on a Velkari warship. But hidden throughout the vessel were crystal formations that hummed with energy only he could feel. "Unknown vessel," a harsh voice crackled through the communication system. "You will follow our guidance beam to the flagship. Any deviation from the designated path will result in your immediate destruction." Dong-Yun activated his response transmitter with steady hands. "This is Captain Dong-Hyun Lim of Earth Defense Force, carrying a diplomatic message from the human government. I request safe passage as specified in the Galactic Council protocols." Alien laughter filled his cockpit. It was the sound of predators who had already decided how their hunt would end. The guidance beam locked onto his ship and began pulling him toward the largest vessel in the fleet. The Velkari flagship was a monster of metal and energy, bristling, with so many weapons that it looked like a floating fortress. Smaller ships swarmed around it like insects protecting their hive. As Dong-Hyun approached the flagship, he could see other alien vessels positioned throughout the fleet. Word of humanity's surrender had spread quickly through the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species had come to witness Earth's humiliation. They floated in their own ships at safe distances, ready to watch the show. The docking procedure was rough and intimidating. Velkari tractor beams seized his ship and slammed it into a docking bay with enough force to rattle his teeth. Armed aliens in powered armor surrounded the vessel before he had even shut down his engines. When the airlock opened, Dong-Yun stepped out into a nightmare of metal and malice. The docking bay was enormous, filled with the shapes of alien war, machines. The air was thick and hot, smelling of oil and ozone and something else that might have been fear from previous victims. 12 Velkari soldiers formed an escort around him. Each warrior stood over 2 meters tall, encased in armor that made them look like walking tanks. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy, and their helmets hid faces that Dong-Hyun was probably grateful not to see. They marched him through corridors that stretched for kilometers. The walls were covered in trophies from conquered worlds. Flags and symbols from dozens of defeated species hung like funeral shrouds. Some of the items looked familiar, and Dong-yun realized with a chill that he was looking at artifacts from species that no longer existed. The command chamber was the size of a football stadium. Tiered platforms rose in concentric circles around a central space, each level packed with alien observers. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to witness humanity's final surrender. Their eyes glowed in the dim light like hungry stars. War Commander Thaxmore stood on the highest platform, his massive form silhouetted against displays showing the Velkari fleet. Around him, his senior officers waited like vultures circling a dying animal. Their armor was decorated with the bones and metals of conquered worlds. "Bring the human forward," Thaxmore commanded, his voice booming through the vast space. Dong-yun walked across the polished floor toward the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Thousands of alien beings watched his every movement, waiting for the entertainment of another species' downfall. He wore his dress uniform, the same dark blue with silver buttons that Ambassador Jinwoo had worn at the Galactic Council. But integrated into the fabric were thin crystal threads that only he could feel. They warmed against his skin, responding to his heartbeat and breathing. When he reached the center of the chamber, Dong-yun stopped and looked up at War Commander Thaxmore. The alien leader was even more imposing in person, a tower of black armor and barely contained violence. "So," Thaxmore said, his voice filled with amusement, "the humans send a child to surrender for them. How fitting!" Laughter rippled through the assembled aliens. Some species chittered like insects. Others roared like beasts. The sound echoed from the walls until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I carry a message from Earth," Dong-yun said clearly. His voice was calm and steady, showing no sign of the fear that any reasonable person would feel in this situation. "I know what your message says," Thaxmore replied. "You have come to kneel before the Velkari Empire. You have come to beg for the privilege of serving us. You have come to surrender your pathetic species to their betters," the war commander began. To descend from his platform, his heavy footsteps ringing like hammer blows on metal. Other Velkari officers followed him, forming a circle around the lone human. "The ritual is simple," Thaxmore continued as he approached. "You will kneel. You will lower your head in submission. You will speak the words of surrender that will make your species our property. And then, if we are feeling generous, we might allow some of your kind to live as our slaves." Dong-yun stood perfectly still as the alien warriors surrounded him. He could feel the crystal technology in his uniform responding to his presence, growing warmer with each breath he took. Something ancient was stirring within his chest, something that had been waiting for this moment. "And if I refuse?" he asked, quietly. Thaxmore stopped directly in front of him. The alien leader was so close that Dong-yun could see his reflection in the polished surface of the helmet. He looked small and fragile compared to the towering warrior, like a candle flame. Standing before a hurricane, "If you refuse," Thaxmore said, "we will broadcast your execution to every world in the galaxy. Then we will turn your pretty blue planet into radioactive dust. Your choice, little human." The alien leader raised one armored hand, gesturing toward A. The displays that showed Earth hanging in space like a fragile blue marble. "Look at your world. See how small it is. See how helpless. In 10 minutes, I could give the order that would end your species forever." Around the chamber, the alien. Observers leaned forward in anticipation. This was the moment they had come to see. The breaking of another species, the crushing of hope, the addition of another set of trophies to the Velkari collection. Dong-yun looked up at the displays showing his home world. Earth seemed so peaceful from space, so beautiful with its swirling, white clouds and deep blue oceans. Somewhere down there, billions of humans were living their lives, unaware that their fate was being decided in an alien warship. He thought of his family. He thought of his friends. He thought of children playing in parks, and old people feeding birds, and everyone in between who deserved the chance to live free. Then he thought of his grandfather's stories about ancient masters who could move mountains with their will. "I understand," Dong-yun said softly. Thaxmore gestured toward the floor with one clawed gauntlet. "Then kneel." The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien eye focused on the small human figure standing alone in the center of the vast space. This was the moment of truth, the instant when another species would join the long list of the conquered and enslaved. Slowly, Captain Dong-yun Lim began to lower his head. But as his head dropped, something else was happening. His breathing was changing, becoming deeper and more controlled. His stance was shifting, subtly but significantly. The crystal threads in his uniform began to glow with faint light. The aliens saw submission. They saw defeat. They saw the familiar sight of another species accepting their place in the Velkari Empire. They had no idea that what they were actually seeing was a master of ancient martial arts assuming the opening stance of a technique that had been refined over thousands of years, a technique that was about to be amplified by technology beyond their understanding, a technique that would change everything. In the command center deep beneath Seoul, dozens of technicians watched their screens with growing dread. Admiral Seon Park stood behind them, her hands clenched into fists as she monitored the signals from Captain Dong-yun Lim's ship. "Communication is still active," reported Lieutenant Jiho Nam. "We can hear everything happening in the Velkari command chamber." The speakers filled with alien voices, harsh and grating as they demanded humanity's surrender. Through it all, they could hear Dong-yun's calm voice, responding with dignity that none of them felt. Dr. Junho-yoon sat at a monitoring station, watching the readings from the crystal technology integrated into Dong-yun's equipment. "The energy levels are rising slowly," he reported, "but still within normal parameters." Nayeon Kim closed her eyes, trying to feel what Dong-yun might be experiencing through their shared understanding of ancient techniques. "He is preparing himself," she whispered, "building focus, gathering inner strength." On the main screen, they could see a long-range view of the Velkari fleet. Hundreds of massive warships filled the darkness of space, their weapons trained on Earth. It was the most terrifying sight any human had ever witnessed. "Energy spike," called out Taehyung Seo from his position at the crystal monitoring station. "Something is changing." In the alien command chamber, Captain Dong-yun Lim continued to lower his head as commanded. To the watching aliens, he looked like just another defeated representative accepting the inevitable. They had seen this scene played out dozens of times with other species. The pattern was always the same: resistance, ultimatum, and finally, submission. But Dong-yun was not submitting. He was centering himself. As his head dropped toward the traditional bow, his breathing shifted into patterns his grandfather had taught him decades ago. Deep, controlled inhalations that drew energy up from the core of his being. Slow, purposeful exhalations that focused his will like light through a lens. The crystal threads woven into his uniform began to respond. They had been designed to amplify human bioelectric fields, and now they encountered something they had never experienced before. Not just the random electrical activity of a normal human nervous system, but the directed, concentrated life energy of a martial arts master in perfect control of his inner power. The readings in Seoul went wild. "Energy levels are climbing beyond our measurement capability," Junho reported, his voice tight with amazement. "Whatever he is doing, it is working." War Commander Thaxmore watched the humans' apparent submission with satisfaction. Around the chamber, alien observers chittered and growled their approval. Another species was about to join the ranks of the conquered, adding their resources and labor to the Velkari Empire. "Speak the words," Thaxmore commanded. Surrender your species to Velkari rule. Dongyun's head continued to drop, but now something else was happening. The air around him began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. The metal floor beneath his feet started to vibrate with a frequency too low to hear, but strong enough to feel in the bones. Some of the more sensitive aliens began to shift uncomfortably. Their natural predator instincts were sending warning signals that they did not understand. Something was wrong with this picture, but they could not identify what it was. The crystal technology throughout Dongyun's ship began to resonate in harmony with his focused energy. Power levels that had been designed to operate within safe parameters suddenly spiked into ranges that the human engineers had thought impossible. In Seoul, alarms started sounding. The readings are off every scale. "We have," Taehyung reported, his voice filled with awe and terror. "The crystal formations are amplifying his bioelectric field by factors we did not think were possible." Nayeon opened her eyes, feeling a wave of energy so powerful it made her gasp. He is accessing something that has been sleeping in human genetics for thousands of years. Something our ancestors knew, but we forgot. On the main display, long-range sensors began detecting energy fluctuations throughout the Velkari fleet. Ship after ship reported minor electrical anomalies, system glitches that their engineers could not explain. In the alien command chamber, Dongyun completed his bow. His head was now lowered in what appeared to be perfect submission, but his stance had shifted into something that martial arts masters would recognize immediately. His feet were positioned for maximum stability and power transfer. His breathing had synchronized with rhythms that ancient texts claimed could move mountains, and the crystal technology was turning him into something unprecedented in galactic history. "I hear your words, War Commander," Dongyun said softly. His voice was calm, but underneath it was something that made the metal walls of the chamber vibrate in sympathy. Thaxmore stepped closer, raising his ceremonial blade to formally accept humanity's surrender. "Then kneel completely and speak the words that will make your species our property." Instead of kneeling further, Dongyun began to raise his head. As he did, the energy readings in Seoul exploded beyond every safety limit. The crystal formations throughout his ship began to glow so brightly that they could be seen through the hull plating. Power surged through circuits that had never been designed to handle such loads. "He is drawing energy from sources we do not understand," Dr. Junho reported, his voice filled with wonder. "The ancient texts spoke of masters who could tap into the fundamental forces of the universe. I think we are seeing that happen." The aliens in the command chamber began to notice that something was seriously wrong. The lights flickered. The gravity generators stuttered. Electronic systems throughout the massive warship started reporting errors and failures. Thaxmore took a step backward, his predator instincts finally recognizing danger. "What are you doing, human?" Dongyun raised his head completely and looked directly into the war commander's glowing red eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of 10,000 generations of human warriors who had refused to submit to tyranny. "I am remembering what we forgot." The energy field around him became visible now, a corona of blue-white light that pulsed with each heartbeat. The crystal technology was no longer just amplifying his bioelectric field. It was resonating with something deeper, something that connected to the very foundations of life itself. Ancient masters had called it Kai. Chinese philosophers had named it Qi. Modern scientists might have recognized it as the organized quantum field effects of consciousness itself, focused and directed through millennia of refined technique. Whatever name it carried, it was power, beyond anything the galaxy had ever encountered. Dongyun slowly raised his right hand, palm open, fingers relaxed. It was a simple gesture that his grandfather had shown him as a child. The basic open palm strike that formed the foundation of traditional martial arts, but amplified by technology designed to work with human consciousness, channeled through the discipline of a lifetime of training and powered by the desperate will of an entire species facing extinction, it became something else entirely. In Seoul, every monitoring system overloaded simultaneously. The readings spiked so high that instruments began shutting down to protect themselves. Through the chaos, they could hear Dong-Yun's voice, "One more. Time, calm and certain. This is for everyone who refuses to kneel." In the Valkyrie command chamber, reality held its breath. Then Captain Dong-Yun Lim struck forward with his open palm, and the universe learned something new about the species from the third planet, something that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The moment Captain Dong-Yun Lim's open palm struck forward, the fabric of space itself seemed to shiver. What emerged from his hand was not visible light or heat or any form of energy that galactic science understood. It was pure human will, refined through thousands of years of martial discipline and amplified by crystal technology into something that transcended the normal laws of physics. The wave of force hit War Commander Thaxmore first, the massive alien, warrior, armored in metal that could withstand planetary bombardment, simply stopped existing in that moment. Not destroyed or vaporized, but temporarily displaced from reality itself. His armor, his weapons, his overwhelming physical presence, all rendered meaningless by contact with focused human consciousness. But the wave did not stop there. It expanded outward from Dong-Yun, like ripples on a cosmic pond, moving at the speed of thought rather than the speed of light. Through the command chamber, down the corridors, across the hull of the flagship, and out into space where it encountered the Valkyrie fleet. In Seoul, every monitoring system that had not already been overloaded suddenly came back online, showing readings that defied comprehension. Energy cascade throughout the enemy fleet, Lieutenant Jiho Nam reported, his voice filled with disbelief. Every Valkyrie ship is reporting massive system failures. Admiral Sion Park stared at the displays in amazement. The red dots that had represented hundreds of enemy warships were flickering and changing color as their threat levels dropped to 0. "How is this possible?" she whispered. Dr. Junho Yoon was frantically checking and rechecking his instruments. The wave is disrupting their technology at the quantum level. Their computers, their weapons, their life support systems. Everything is being affected by some form of organized interference pattern. Naeun Kim understood what the others could not. "He is not destroying them," she said with quiet awe. "He is showing them that their technology means nothing when faced with the power of focused consciousness. The ancient masters were right. Mind over matter is not just philosophy. It is physics we never understood. In space, the effects were visible to the naked eye. Ship after ship in the Valkyrie formation went dark as their power systems failed. Not damaged, not destroyed, but simply rendered inoperative by contact with something that their science had never accounted for. The wave continued expanding, reaching the observer vessels that had come to witness humanity's surrender. Alien representatives from dozens of species watched in stunned silence as their own ships experienced similar but lesser effects. Their technology flickered and struggled, touched by the edge of something beyond their understanding. On the bridge of a Zenthari observation vessel, Captain Vexithara stared at readings that made no sense. The human ship is generating an energy field that our instruments cannot classify. It appears to be affecting the fundamental constants of local spacetime. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy as news of the impossible event spread, at faster-than-light speed through quantum communication networks. In the Valkyrie command chamber, Dong-Hyun stood alone in a circle of perfect silence. The thousands of alien observers who had come to watch humanity's humiliation were frozen in place, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. War Commander Thaxmore reappeared gradually, as if reality was slowly remembering that he existed. His armor was unchanged, his weapons undamaged, but something fundamental had shifted. The overwhelming confidence that had defined him for centuries was gone, replaced by something aliens rarely experienced: genuine fear. "Impossible," he whispered, his voice barely audible through his helmet speakers. Dong-yun lowered his hand slowly, the energy field around him fading to a gentle glow. He was breathing heavily now, the enormous effort of channeling such power having taken its toll. But his eyes were clear, and his voice was steady when he spoke. "Nothing is impossible," he said quietly. "You simply encountered something you did not know existed." The chamber remained silent as the implications sank in. Every alien present was recalculating everything they thought they knew about the species from the third planet. Humans were not just another primitive race with basic technology. They possessed something that no other known species had ever demonstrated: the ability to affect reality through focused consciousness alone. Communications channels throughout the galaxy began buzzing with reports and analysis. The word spread quickly. Humanity had capabilities that transcended normal understanding of science and technology. In Seoul, the command center erupted in cheers as the threat level readings for the entire Valkyrie fleet remained at 0. Admiral Park could barely believe what she was seeing. "Captain Lim," she broadcast to the diplomatic vessel, "report your status." Dong-yun's voice came back clear and calm. "Mission accomplished, Admiral. The Valkyrie fleet is no longer operational. Requesting permission to begin diplomatic negotiations." War Commander Thaxmore looked around at his disabled fleet, then back at the human who had accomplished the impossible. His warriors stood frozen, their weapons useless, their armor providing no protection against an attack that bypassed all physical defenses. "What do you want?" he asked, and for the first time in his voice carried respect instead of contempt. Dong-yun straightened his uniform and smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who had just proven that legends could become reality. "Peace," he said simply. "Trade agreements, cultural exchange, the same things Ambassador Kim offered you at the Galactic Council." "And if we refuse?" Dong-yun's smile did not change, but something in his eyes suggested that what they had just witnessed was only a small demonstration of human potential. "Then you continue to exist in a galaxy where humans have learned to remember what they forgot. Your choice, War Commander." Throughout the disabled Valkyrie fleet, emergency systems slowly began coming back online. Their weapons remained inoperative, but life support and communication systems flickered back to life as the wave effect gradually faded. Thaxmore realized that the human had not destroyed them. He had disabled them completely while ensuring they could survive and recover. It was not the action of a conqueror, but of someone who possessed overwhelming power and chose to use it with restraint. "The Valkyrie Empire," he said slowly, "would be honored to discuss peaceful relations with humanity." Similar messages began flooding in from across the galaxy. Species that had ignored human diplomatic overtures for decades suddenly found themselves very interested in establishing friendly relationships with Earth. The Zenthari sent offers of technological exchange. The Morvek proposed trade agreements. The Killian requested cultural ambassadors. Every major civilization in the galaxy wanted to be on good terms with the species that had just demonstrated abilities beyond their comprehension. In Seoul, Ambassador Jinwoo Kim found himself overwhelmed with incoming diplomatic messages. His small office, which had been struggling to get any alien species to take humans seriously, was suddenly the most important diplomatic center in the galaxy. Dr. Junho Yoon and his team began receiving research requests from universities and institutes across hundreds of worlds. Everyone wanted to understand how humans had developed such extraordinary capabilities. But Nayeon Kim understood the deeper truth. The power had always been there, sleeping in human genetics and human culture. The ancient masters who spoke of moving mountains with their will had not been speaking in metaphors. They had been describing literal capabilities that the human species possessed, but had forgotten how to access. The crystal technology had not given humans anything new. It had simply reminded them of what they had always been capable of achieving. As rescue ships from dozens of species converged on the disabled Valkyrie fleet, the galaxy began to adjust to a new reality. Humanity was not just another member species seeking a place at the galactic table. They were something unprecedented, a race that could bridge the gap between consciousness and physical reality in ways that no one had thought possible. Captain Dong-Yun Lim sat quietly in his diplomatic vessel, watching the stars and feeling the gentle hum of crystal technology that had helped him remember an ancient truth. His grandfather's stories had not been myths after all. They had been instruction manuals, waiting for the day when humanity would need to remember what it meant to be truly human. The galaxy was about to learn that the quiet species from the third planet had depths that no one had imagined. And in martial arts schools and meditation centers across Earth, ancient masters smiled and began teaching their students that some legends were simply truths waiting for their time to return. The age of humanity had begun, not through conquest or technology, but through the rediscovery of abilities that had always been their birthright. In the end, they had not needed bigger weapons or faster ships. They had only needed to remember who they were,